Dear ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to say a few words about the bleeding hearts and about their solidarity with poor Palestinian Arabs. You know that nowadays, all over Mother Europe, all over North America, there are huge manifestations where hundreds of thousands of people are expressing their vocal support of the case of Palestinian Arabs, or the so-called Palestinian Arabs. Those guys who are cutting off the heads of babies, raping women, kidnapping people, murdering them, but nevertheless, hundreds of thousands of people all over the world are supporting them. And now I'm not talking about the Arabs supporting them, and not even about other Muslims supporting them, including Islamic fundamentalists. They have their own agenda and they don't care about Palestine. They care about some other things about which we can talk sometimes later. Definitely not today. What I would like to talk about today and right now is about the bleeding hearts of Germans, English people, Scotchmen, Frenchmen, and women, of course, Italians, Canadians, Americans, all those who have nothing to do with the Arab world, who have nothing to do with Islam, but nevertheless their hearts are crying and bleeding for the poor Palestinians. Someone would say, yes, we are compassionate, we are kind-hearted. That's why we are supporting those poor people who lost their land and who are now being bombed by the Israeli occupants. Okay. I would understand that, if not something else. You know what? As a historian, I can tell you, immediately after the Second World War, millions of Germans were thrown out of the lands which had been inhabited by their ancestors for centuries. I mean here 2 million Germans from Eastern Prussia. Prussia is not Russia, it's part of Eastern Germany historically. 300,000 people of the city of Danzig, almost 2 million people from Pomerania, and about 3,250,000 Germans from Silesia, or Schlesien in German. Several million people were kicked out of their homeland. They were not allowed to sell their real estate property. They were not allowed sometimes even to pack a couple of suitcases. Sometimes their daughters and wives were raped by the liberators. And no single heart is bleeding about them. No single heart. Just like no single heart is bleeding about the carpet bombings of the German cities during the Second World War. And by the way, those Germans, I knew quite a few of those Germans who had been kicked out of the Eastern German provinces. None of them is cutting throats of the babies. None of them is committing acts of terror. None of them was attempting to explode bombs or doing other nasty things for some reasons. And again, nobody feels sorry about them. But of course, yes, those people came to the new places, to the new countries, or to them parts of Germany where they were not too welcomed, by the way, started working hard, and the percentage of successful people among those people who were kicked out of their homeland, the amount of effective and successful people is way higher than average all over Germany. Well, here you may say, well, that was the war. And Germany started the Second World War. So Germany lost its territory according to the right of victory, the right of war, and accordingly the ethnic cleansing was performed. Well, first and foremost, by the way, after the Second World War, Alsace, now part of France that had been inhabited by people of German background, was also taken away from the Third Reich and re-annexed to France. Nobody was kicking out its people for being Germans, but that's another topic. Speaking about launching wars, you know better than me, probably as good as I don't know, that as soon as the United Nations declared the creation of the State of Israel, that State of Israel was immediately attacked by the Palestinian Arabs and the armies of other neighboring Arab countries. The Jews managed to win the war, and again, as a result of the war, they annexed certain territories, and those who were shooting at them had to leave. So how is it different from the situation with the Germans? I'd use more provocative examples. Poland, for example, never launched the Second World War. However, it was invaded by the Soviets and by the Nazis, and as a result of the Second World War, the Soviets annexed 60% of pre-war Polish territory, claiming that it's Western Ukraine and Western Belarus. Nowadays, those territories are also parts of Belarus and Ukraine. And 4.5 million Poles disappeared from those territories. About 1 million of them were slaughtered or deported to Siberia, where they died, but about 3.5 million moved westwards to the lands that were taken away from Germany and given to Poland. I mean, most of East Prussia, Silesia, Pomerania, and the city of Danzig, now Gdansk. Those Poles also left everything behind, including their personal belongings, not to mention their houses and beautiful gardens, and nobody cares about them. No single bleeding heart is crying about them. Why? I don't know. And by the way, the Poles are also not exploding bombs, not cutting other people's throats, and not rocking the boat. There are a few other examples. More than 2 million Armenians were either slaughtered in Western Armenia, which is now Turkey, or kicked out of the land that had been pampered by their ancestors. More than 1 million Greeks had to leave Anatolia, this is now Turkey as well, without even carrying a suitcase with them. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to know. Well, in the 90s, in 1993, 300,000 Georgians were expelled from Abkhazia. Many of them, by the way, were killed. Many of them were raped. And again, no acts of terror and no bleeding hearts for them. Also, about 1.5 million of French people who lived in Algeria, they were also kicked out in the 60s. Nobody cares. Why? Why those bleeding hearts are bleeding only for the Palestinian Arabs? I don't know. But I can only guess. Well, Jewish people tend to say that it's because of anti-Semitism. Well, anti-Semitism, of course, exists, but I don't think this is the major issue. No. Let's take a look. What do Germans, Poles, Armenians, Greeks, Georgians, and French people, pieds noirs from Algeria, have in common? I can tell you. All of them are Christians, and all of them are Europeans, belonging to our civilization. And Palestinian Arabs are non-Christians, non-Europeans. They are Muslims, most of them. Some of them are Christians, but they are badly mistreated in the so-called zone of Palestinian autonomy, and most of them already left. So that might lead to a really weird conclusion. The bleeding hearts are not bleeding about our people, but they are bleeding about some people about whom you know nothing. You know nothing about their history. You know nothing about their culture. By the way, you believe that they lost their land? That's so not true. They never owned that land. Well, most of the landowners who became the first leaders of the PLA were Egyptian landlords. That's one thing. Like Yasser Arafat was Egyptian, and he was angry that he sold his land to the Jews. The Jews, by the way, paid money for every lot of land they got in Israel, but that's another topic. Before the British took over Palestine in order to create their Jewish state, nobody was talking those days about a Palestinian Arab state. But the British took that land from Ottoman Turkey, who lost the First World War. So before Israel, they were British. Before British, they were Turks. Under Turks, Palestinian Arabs, the so-called Palestinian Arabs, never had any autonomy, nothing even similar to that. Before Turks, there were Crusaders. Before Crusaders, there were Greeks, Byzantine Empire. Before them, there was Rome, and before Rome, there were some Jewish states, Judea and Israel. So where was the Palestinian Arab state that they lost? Nowhere. So the conclusion is, let me repeat, the possible conclusion. I would like to make a disclaimer. I'm not insisting on what I'm going to say right now. I'm just trying to say that this question may arise. The question could be the following. Maybe the bleeding hearts are bleeding only for the aliens, but not for the representatives of our civilization. If it is so, then why is it so? There is something wrong about it. If you wish, we can talk about that a little bit more, but not today, but some other time. Wishing you all the best. Have fun if you can, and enjoy your life as long as you can enjoy it. Bye-bye.